right, so we've looked at this fight at nausea from the angle of George Masvidal. Everything is on brand for George Masvidal. Short notice, halfway around the world, 22 pounds to get off, all in a 6-day period, 5 days to the weigh-in. I mean, a lot is on Masvidal where there's really no way to lose. But what that does when you look at the other side of the coin is it puts Usman in a little bit of a tough spot. And I do feel this is an ongoing theme of Usman's career where no matter how much he does right, the right way, within the rules, on time, when he said he would do it for the price he would say he would do it for. I mean, everything that we're looking for in an athlete, it's still very hard to give him credit. It seems as there's already a dialogue out there right now about, well, nothing can go wrong for Masvidal. He's in a win-win situation. If he loses the fight as he's expected to do as a 3-1 underdog, okay, great. Nothing to see here. That's exactly where it was supposed to go, and he doesn't stumble in the rankings. Oh, by the way, he's still the BMF champion because the BMF title isn't on the line. The other side of the coin is what if? What if Masvidal goes and throws another Hail Mary and puts Usman down? When you look at it from that standpoint, you are in many ways, whether you mean to or not, you're taking away from Usman, who's doing all of those same things. And yeah, maybe Usman knew that this fight was coming up and he knew that this date was coming up and he was training for it. Maybe some of those things are true, but Usman still said yes. We've had other fights on short notice. 151, John Jones versus Dan Henderson, just by example, where the champ said no. John Jones really wasn't wrong in that situation, by the way. He came out with a little bit of egg on his face, but in all fairness, John Jones really wasn't wrong in that situation. The deal changed on John, and therefore he had a right to come out and speak on it. All I'm talking about is when you do look at Usman, how many things does this guy have to do right before we give him a little bit of credit? I mean, take a look at his career. He comes to the Ultimate Fighter, the toughest tournament in all of sports, as the champion. Some of you might not have even known that. He never got credit for that. And in all fairness, that really falls to every Ultimate Fighter champion in history not named Forrest Griffin. Guys were never really given their due for that. And perhaps I come to you with a different perspective, having gone through that process twice myself and just seen the strain and the drain and the struggle that these athletes go through. But you go back and you look at that season that Kamaru won, that was as loaded of a bracket as the sport of MMA has ever seen. Call it Ultimate Fighter, call it a Grand Prix, any way you want to do it. He came out of there champion. He couldn't get a lot of run for that for whatever reason, but eventually over his career, he ends up in the ring with RDA. Now at this point, he's never lost a UFC fight. He's even beaten guys with names like Leon Edwards, who just wasn't as recognizable at that time. But either way, he does find himself in his first ever main event with his first ever former world champion, and he goes out and he dominates that fight. Now, there was really no way to deny him anymore if you wanted to, if you were just in the haters club. When you become one of the very few men to ever get his hand raised against RDA, it means something. That draws him into T. Wood, and this is for the title. And he was a 2.5-1 underdog going into that fight. And I remember thinking that was right. I remember thinking, well, I'm very familiar with Usman. But anything that he's done on paper, you could compare that against Tyron, but Tyron's paper is going to look a little bit better. Tyron had just a little bit more experience. And they both did great in wrestling, but Tyron did a little bit better. And they both were having really good MMA careers, but Tyron was the champion. On paper, I see how the odds makers came to that conclusion, but that fight was very decisive. 5 rounds up, 5 rounds down, we got a new champion. That then draws him into Colby. Now, because the Colby show was so damn fun, and yes, they had a little extracurricular activity at the Palms Casino in a buffet line waiting on crab legs, it did make for a mega fight. But it was still one of these situations where people were either showing up to see Colby win or they were showing up to see Colby lose, but they weren't giving Kamaru his full credit. One person who did give Kamaru his credit after that fight was Colby. Colby comes in, that's a pretty tough guy. Kamaru returned that compliment back to Covington, and Kamaru said about Colby, he said, that's a tough guy. I'm going to see him again someday. But now he's fighting himself against the BMF champion. But somehow the BMF title isn't up for grabs, which just strikes me as yet one more way we have allowed to take away from Usman. And it does seem with the story going along around him taking on the BMF, taking on the only other champion within the division, be much like a champion taking on an interim champion. I mean, in all fairness, right? we're not quite giving Kamaru his due. And I do think that the storyline is very fair that, look, it is accurate to say Masvidal does appear to be in a win-win situation. I think that that is fair. I think that it is unfair to not want to shine Usman, who is doing the same thing. Usman was training to fight Masvidal. He then stopped training to fight Masvidal and started training to fight his own friend Gilbert Burns. He never flinched once. And he came out in the media kind of looking like the skunk at the garden party that wasn't willing to fight Masvidal. And in all fairness, we never got that fully revealed to us as to what happened there. Then it looked as though Masvidal was holding out, but we still didn't give any shine back to Usman. And now this fight is going to take place on very short notice, and Usman still, again, says, bring me anybody at 170 pounds, 5 rounds, main event for my championship. Usman appears to me as a guy who not only this week is doing everything that we say we want our heroes to do, but it would appear, if you look back over his career, he has done everything that we say we want our heroes to do. And I think it's about time that Usman starts to be treated like a hero.